everyone. How the devil are you? Edijester here. Hey, another day, another dollar, another shirt, the dirty collar. I've been watching with interest the unfolding outrage, and rightly so, at a document that's been created by Anne A. Lawrence, MD, PhD, and being a cross-dressing man and somebody who has mutilated their body, I believe. I'm not sure, I believe. So I'm quite happy to put wrong on that, put right on that, same as I am with everything. And it's called autogynephilia at 35, which is a reference to the invention of the term autogynephilia by Ray Blanchard. I've seen some cobblers in my time, but it looks to me like the first, because I've only read the first bit. And I thought, well, read the first bit, then we'll do a cold reading with you lot, which is what we're going to do today. All right. Before that, become a warrior teacher. If you can buy me a coffee, that helps me keep continuing. If you want me to continue, please do buy me a coffee or send me a super thanks. The usual stuff. All right. So you can see it on the screen there, autogynephilia at 35. And it begins. Males with the propensity to be sexually aroused by the thought or image of themselves as female have undoubtedly existed throughout human history and have been described and studied by sexual scientists for over 150 years. But the unusual erotic interest they experienced was not given a scientific name until 1989, when psychologist Ray Blanchard coined the term autogynephilia. I have discussed the genesis of the term and its implications in several articles. Lawrence, 2013, 2017. Right, well, first off, let's get this absolutely straight. The propensity for men to be sexually aroused by inanimate objects has been around for history. The propensity for men to be aroused by all sorts of things has been around for history. It doesn't give it any credence whatsoever. It says it's been described and studied by sexual scientists for over 150 years. Well, it might have been. It may well be that they've also studied people who think they're Napoleon. So I don't understand why that would be in there unless there's some attempt to give it provenance, which I don't think it has. Now, Ray Blanchard is the one that coined the term. He's discussed the genesis of it before. Initially, the concept of autogynephilia was known only to professionals working in the field of gender dysphoria. That's an interesting idea and was not considered controversial, but over the ensuing decades, this has changed. Well, that's because they weren't demanding rights to women's spaces, I would presume, and that's because they weren't behaving so homophobically. But again, I'll leave you to decide that. Autogynephilia, a scientific term that is purely descriptive, has become a disputed and contentious topic. This essay considers the status and significance of the concept of autogynephilia at age 35. The phenomena that autogynephilia denotes, a male's propensity to be sexually aroused by the thought or image of himself as a female, is almost universally acknowledged to exist. A non-trivial number of males, as many as 3% or more. No, not 3% or more, for goodness sake. It's just, how can that even vaguely be true? Right? It can't be true, can it? And I think what you're doing there is saying that, in essence, cross-dressing, fetishism, presents in 3% or more of males. And they report this pattern of erotic interest, albeit with varying degrees of intensity and exclusivity. And there's the get out, right? So if it's got varying degrees of intensity and exclusivity, that could include somebody who, when they were 16, thought it was horny to do X, Y, Z, or when they were 30, thought it was horny to do X, Y, Z. It doesn't mean necessarily that they've lost themselves in the paraphilia. Some gender dysphoric males, well, the idea of gender dysphoria I've got problems with anyway. I don't think it's a real thing. I think it's a different thing altogether. I think it's bodily identity integrity disorder. I think it's about wanting to remove parts of your body. I think it's often a castration fetish. So some gender dysphoric males identify as autogynephiliac, right? And insist that the term accurately describes their feelings and experiences. Okay, yep. Their accounts cannot be ignored except by marginalizing or erasing the experiences of a large subgroup of transgender persons. Right, so now autogynephiles are a subgroup of transgender persons, which is a category that doesn't exist. It simply doesn't exist. Weird. Nevertheless, many committed transgender activists disparage or reject outright the concept of autogynephilia. Isn't that interesting? The term itself, the transgender topology associated with it, and the theory that it often motivates male to female gender transition and sex reassignment are now frequently described by transgender positive commentators as disproven or debunked. It is notable that Wikipedia, the largest and most influential online encyclopedia, does not even contain a descriptive entry for autogynephilia, but instead redirects to Blanchard's transsexualism typology, where the term admittedly does appear. This puzzling omission undoubtedly reflects the term's disputed status. In many quarters, autogynephilia has now replaced male homosexuality as the love that dare not speak its name. Insane, absolutely insane. I think what's happening here is, does this sound like an apologia to you? Because it certainly does to me. To me, so that's the sort of beginning of it. I mean, bear in mind this is 4 pages long, so I mean there's quite a bit to go through. The term autogynephilia has become so toxic in transgender positive circles that a few writers have proposed more acceptable euphemism for it. An example from the academic literature is female embodiment fantasies. Right, so now we're back into the area of taking what Blanchard had to say in his term autogynephilia, philia, and they're proposing now, well, let's just change it. Just change the words. Sound familiar? Just change the words, as if you can create reality by changing the words. We know that the whole thing is based on fantasy and unbelief and unreality. Alternative constructions like this testify to the unpopularity of the term autogynephilia, but also to the inability of the skeptics to deny the existence and relevance of the phenomenon itself. Well, I don't think anybody is denying the fact that there are men who think like this. I don't think anybody's denying that there are people who think they're fat when they're thin. I don't know what the point of this article really is, unless to say we're going to change the way that we talk about people who are deluded enough to think they're women. How about that? I mean, what you want to change the name of anorexia next to you? Peculiar way to look at the world. Alternative constructions like this to testify. I'm sorry, I've said that. Why are some members of the transgender? Why are some members of the transgender positive community so interested in mischaracterizing and debunking the concept of autogynephilia, despite the fact that many transgender persons identify with it? The most passionate critics appear to fit the autogynephilic profile themselves, and the most passionate critics appear to fit the autogynephilic profile themselves. Well, of course they do. I don't like being called autogynephile. Why? Because I am one. And presumably find the concept incompatible with their hard-won identities. See? With their hard-won identities. This is an interesting statement to me, because this concept of identity is not actually what it appears to be. Nobody has an identity. There'll be people on the GC, in the GC movement, that will argue with me about that. People all over the place will argue about that. You don't have an identity. All you have is a personality. And out of that, you can create a character. But when you throw technology into the mix and you start rattling on about identities, what you end up with is a brand. Because essentially, that's what this is. It's talking about men who want to brand themselves as something they are not. They want to build a brand around themselves that hides the true nature of them, which is that they are male. Others are allies, eager to demonstrate their solidarity, including a few prominent members of the kink community. Oh, there we go. Let's bring the kink in, as if this hasn't got a huge sexual motive behind it, which it has. So this flowery language is attempting to hide two basic truths. One, you can't be something you're not, and two, getting off on the fact that you think you are is definitely not something that's healthy for society. That's what it's trying to hide. Despite their opposition, the concept of autogynephilia continues to be recognized in the professional literature. This term is indexed in the US National Library of Medicine and also appears in the latest edition of the Diagnostic. Yeah, I don't care if it appears in that sales book, which is what that is, by the way. They talk about it as if it's a statistical manual. Well, the UK doesn't use it at all because it's a sales book. These people get together once a year and go, what's the product this year? Oh, I don't know. Painful finger syndrome, right? Let's get on it. Everybody's got it. I just see it as a sales book for a, frankly, in most cases, deluded industry. Now, so evidently the mental health establishment does not consider autogynephilia to be debunked or meaningless concept. I'm not saying it's been debunked, and I'm saying it's being meaningless. I'm saying that it is given a veneer of respectability, as if it's anything to do with medicine whatsoever, by being called autogynephilia. The sexologists brought it in to the medical sphere when it isn't a medical issue. It's an issue of whether or not it's publicly acceptable to have cross-dressing men who think there's something they're not, wandering around your office, performing their fetish without your consent. But the term is referenced in the DSM-5 blah blah as a specifier for a diagnosis of transvestic fetishism. Yeah, that's what it is, isn't it? They're just transvestites. Not as an associated feature of gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is not a thing in itself. If you feel what we would term gender dysphoria, that is a symptom of a greater malaise. It is not in itself a thing. This represents an unfortunate step backwards from the year 2000, in which autogynephilia was described as an associated feature of gender identity disorder in males. So the whole thing is wrapped up in psychology, when in fact all it is cross-dressing men. You want to cross-dress in private. And then we need to provide very strong support for trans widows. Nobody here is talking to trans widows, I can tell you that now. Nowadays, the person most inclined to write and talk about autogynephilia are members of a transgender critical camp. One of the most influential of them, Helen Joyce, devoted an entire chapter of her 2021 book Trans to the topic and has spoken about it in several online interviews. Some transgender critical researchers have published articles about so-called rapid onset gender dysphoria, in which they have described a subset of gender dysphoric adolescents as autogynephilic, and others have tried to measure the strength and prevalence of autogynephilia in online samples. These researchers have often given interviews publicising the concept, but with little sensitivity or compassion. Yet my sensitivity and compassion for cross-dressing LARPing men and women is zero at this point. Zero. We're done. All right? And there's absolutely no way on God's earth that you should be doing it in public. As far as I'm concerned, it is a fetish. That's it. It's either a fetish or a paraphillias, one or the other. But it just makes me mad. These researchers have often given interviews publicising the concept, but with little sensitivity or compassion. For those of us who consider autogynephilia an important and underappreciated concept, their attention feels in some respects like getting aid and comfort from the enemy. But their smirking, sensationalising attitudes serve to demonise a group of male transgender persons who experience an uncommon but essentially harmless sexual orientation. Let's get this absolutely straight, because this is where we seem to get really confused, and I can see what this bloke's doing here. He's trying to attach cross-dressing to the concept of autogynephilia. He's trying to create a sexual orientation, a fourth sexual orientation when there are only three. Okay, and in creating that fourth sexual orientation, what he does is he creates a if you will, a constructed idea of an individual separate from the binds of their biological body, male, female, bisexual, homosexual, heterosexual. This is what the attempt is to do, is to separate out this victim class, this individual group of people who are then, of course, in need of special treatment. It's not a sexual orientation, and it's homophobic to say so. Why are so many members of the transgender critical movement so interested in publicising and mischaracterising autogynephilia? One reason is that feminists, and others too, feel justifiably outraged when transsexual and transgender males who identify as women feel entitled to enter women-only spaces and behave inappropriately, including demanding to participate in women's competitive sports. The critics believe that these interlopers are invariably autogynephilic. Right, here we go. It's not them, it's us. It's not us, it's them. So what we've got now is a group of people from this trans lunacy who are attempting to separate themselves out from good trans and bad trans. That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, prove me wrong, but it sounds like that to me. And then it's said here, probably they are not wrong about this, but it is not clear why autogynephilia, let's go back up to the top there, why autogynephilia should be a consideration at all. Inappropriate behaviour in women-only spaces is unacceptable regardless of the perpetrator's sexual orientation. It's got nothing to do with sexual orientation. You see how the sleight of hand works here, right? See how the sleight of hand works here. It's everything to do with a person's sex, and it's everything to do with leaving women alone. But autogynephilia is a male paraphilia, so if these intruders are believed to be autogynephilic, this effectively undercuts the idea that they deserve to be regarded as women, are entitled to enter women-only spaces. Then nobody deserves to be regarded as a woman if they're a man. It's absolutely invalid. Moreover, the suggestion that these invaders are using women-only spaces as arenas for enacting them autogynephilic behaviour fantasies makes them seem depraved and disgusting, even when their overt behaviour is objectionable. Yes, that's right, they are depraved and disgusting. A second reason is that many social conservatives in the transgender critical movement simply despise any public display of gender nonconformity. That is an outright lie. That is an outright lie. So here we go. So we're separate from the bad trans. It's actually a sexual orientation, so you have to treat us the same way as the gays. And while you're at it, everybody who says no is a right-wing fascist social conservative because they don't like any public display of gender nonconformity. Absolute utter rubbish of the first order. Autogynephilic persons who identify or live as women are often gender. Nobody can identify or live as a woman, right? If you drop that bullshit from the beginning, then all this goes away. Who identify as live as women are often gender nonconforming in appearance and behaviour. Are they? Right? I think they're actually gender conforming because they always look like a bloody stereotype to me. Now, like the drag queens they somewhat resemble. Here we go. Let's bring in a phenomena which was a gay phenomena, drag queens, right? And talk about them as if they're the same as us. Again, an attempt there at forced teaming autogynephilia with gay to make it look like a sexual orientation. It's not a sexual orientation. Like the drag queens they somewhat resemble. They are easy targets for decision and contempt. Publicizing and mischaracterizing autogynephilia therefore promotes transgender exclusion and marginalization. Right, so what you're saying is that people with autogynephilia are separate from those that are perverts. We're not the same as them, blah, blah, blah. That's what you're saying, isn't it? We're the good ones. Nah. If you were the good ones, you'd recognize it for what it was, and you'd stop performing it in public. It promotes transgender exclusion. So now they've gone back to the... So now they've talked about the autogynephile, they've gone back to publicizing and mischaracterizing autogynephile promotes transgender exclusion. So they've gone back to the big umbrella there. So it's actually promoting exclusion of transgender people, which you know as well as I do opens it up to everybody. So if there is a discrete topology here, if there is a discrete breakdown of different type of transness, right, that's your problem under your umbrella, because as far as I'm concerned, the whole umbrella goes. You know why? Because it causes actual harm. Actual harm to women, actual harm to gay people, and actual harm to children. This is absolutely appalling apologia for your condition to be socially accepted as real, when we know it is nothing but damaging. Ugh. And it serves the unstated but obvious agenda of the right. So here we go. Publicizing and mischaracterizing autogynephilia therefore promotes transgender exclusion and marginalization, and serves the unstated but obvious agenda of the transgender critical movement, which is to restrict or criminalize gender transition and sex reassignment for everyone in every country. Absolutely correct, right? But not for the movement. There's individuals that think that. I think that. I think the only way to end this is to end this. I think it's always been a mistake. From the very beginning when they did it years ago, it was feminine boys, and you ain't getting access to them. In every country, in every circumstance, irrespective of age, diagnosis, or personal preference. So now, right, so no, right, you ain't getting it. That's my take. It ends across the board. It's too damaging to our society. It ends. It ends. Right? You don't need to diagnose a sexual fetish. And if you're diagnosing something that is all-consuming, a paraphilia in your life, and you're saying that paraphilia, which is what's being said here, is lifelong and cannot change, what other paraphilias are lifelong and cannot change? And how do you want to deal with them? Restraint is how you deal with them. I don't go round throwing chocolate eclairs at men in their late 20s because it gives me a boner. Does the concept of autogynephilia currently have any significance for clinical practice with gender dysphoric males? It evidently has very little at present, except when clients themselves use the term. When cross-gender eroticism is such a prominent clinical concern that it cannot be ignored, or when parents and spouses try to make sense of gender dysphoria in their masculine male children and partners. Masculine male children and partners. Most practitioners who treat gender dysphoric clients are unfamiliar with the concept, reject it as debunked or transphobic, or do not accord it much significance. So what we're getting here is we need autogynephilia. We need it. You've got to hold on to that concept of autogynephilia, because once you remove the idea, it just becomes another fetish among other fetishes. Autogynephilia is not referenced or recognized in the current DSM diagnostic criteria for gender dysphoria, and is not a consideration in providing or withholding puberty blocking or feminizing hormones for adolescents or adults in any way, any accepted treatment protocols. Its current clinical relevance therefore seems quite limited. Yep, that's because we're not going to give puberty blockers to anyone, okay? And we're not going to give feminizing hormones to anyone. End of story, right? That's what we need to stop. So this is really just a rant, isn't it? It's like mine, an angry rant against the idea that we are closing in on you and that we are going to end it. That's what this is. I'm pissed off because things aren't going our way. Does the concept of autogynephilia currently have any significance for clinical or experimental research with gender dysphoric males? There should be no research. There should be no, because the research will start with the kids, won't it? Won't it? Right? There will be no research. You're not getting access to children who are feminine, right? If they're ill upstairs, then you deal with the upstairs. You don't start messing around with their body and giving them puberty blockers. I don't care who you are. It says here, its significance seems minor at present, although this may be about to change. Transgender positive researchers have been disinclined to study autogynephilia. What are you researching? Whether to go to Marks and Spencer's or whether to go to House of Fraser? What are you studying about this nonsense? right? That we've created a so-called reality of an individual who is separate from everybody else just because they like to cross-dress or because they're running away from their actual sex. It ends. This is what they don't get. Is this going to end? Or do get, I think, in this case. Most do not consider the phenomenon meaningful or important, and the rare exceptions realize that the concept is so toxic that they would be mercilessly attacked if they gave it any attention. Nevertheless, a few brave transgender positive investigators are preparing to publish clinical case reports of autogynephilic adolescents and young adults undergoing hormone therapy. Here we go. The autogynephilic child. It's coming. They need it. They need it. They have to prove that this nonsense is innate, that it is somehow hardwired into them as a separate sexual orientation from the rest of us in order to keep going with their absolute obsession with the paraphilic idea that you can be something you are not. That's what they're going to go after. They're going to go after the kids. That's why we have to be in the way. Unfortunately, it seems that some of us aren't right now. As noted earlier, transgender critical investigators have asked about autogynephilia in online surveys, but have conducted almost no clinical studies, probably because most have no clinical credentials or experience. Their studies of adolescents with our so-called ROGD have identified an autogynephilic subgroup, but this finding is problematic. Like all sexual orientations, autogynephilia develops early in life. No, right? There is no. Children don't have paraphilias until they're introduced to them. This is not a sexual orientation, you homophobic, misogynistic worm. What do they think it is? Anyway, listen, there's another couple of pages to go, and I suggest you go read it yourself. Because it gets surreal. Look, in autogynephilic adolescence, gender dysphoria that adult informants consider rapid reflects the unfolding of an innate sexual orientation. Your sexual orientation is that you can't accept the reality of who you are, and every time you put on clothes that make you look like something you're not, you get a boner. That's not a sexual orientation, mate. That's a paraphilia. Stay away from the kids. It's got nothing to do with kids. If your son is jacking himself off with fury wearing a pinafore and a pair of his sister's knickers, you've got a problem. And we need to start telling kids how dangerous this crap is. That's the thing. And that doesn't make me socially conservative. That makes me give a damn about child protection. This is a disgraceful piece. And it undermines child protection. It tries to inherently insist that there is such a thing as a paraphilic child, which they're not. Debbie Hayton does the same sort of thing. We've been warning people in our movement for the last few years. There is no need to engage with these men. There is nothing they have to say that is of import. We're well past that. We're 6 years past the bloody Cathy Newman interview. Do you know that? With Jordan Peterson, where she's rattling on about this, that, and bloody t'other and causing an uproar, which brought a lot of people to this. Right? We stop this in every sense of the word. Medical, social, we stop it. Let's put it back on the pages of books where it belongs, or back into the darkest corner of the internet where it should stay. Stay away from the kids. There are no autogynephilic kids. There are no paraphilic children. And if there are anything that they're up to that appears to say that they are, then there's a safeguarding issue somewhere else. Safeguarding first. That's it. That's it. And that's how it should stay. We're not normalising fetishistic men flouncing around the office in a Laura Ashley skirt with a boner. We're not doing it, right? And that's what we need to stop. I'm still waiting for the letter. Dear HR, there's a man practicing his fetish or paraphilia in the office called X. Please remove him and then see what HR does. We haven't got it yet. I'm still waiting to see that happen because it should. It needs to. Okay? This is simply an apologia for a sexual proclivity and sexual behaviour that should be, rightly, along with others, practiced in the dark, in the corners of, your private life with friends and loved ones. Same as when you got pups walking down city centres. It's time to get these people back in the closet, right? Because they're not sexualities, they're fetishes. Nobody's saying that gay people should go back in the closet. Nobody's saying lesbians should go back in the closet. Nobody's saying that bisexual people shouldn't be bisexual. What we're saying is it's time to recognise what this fetish nonsense is, as they mentioned kink earlier, and to make it unacceptable to do it in the public square. That's the way forward. And shame will do that. Shame. And stop talking to them because you give them legitimacy. Oh, now you're the one that's saying no debate. You must be a cult. All right. I think most people will be quite happy with the fact that we never hear from you again. apart from when you're in court because you've abused your wife and children because you can't control your bloody fetish or your paraphilia. But that's just me. You let me know what you think in the comments as usual. This is a disgusting piece. I think it's anti-safeguarding, anti-reality, homophobic and misogynist. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.